Thank you very much for the introduction, and good evening and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this final panel of the three-day CETA Business Summit, which will focus on the sector that is at the heart of the EU's goals, policies, and strategies for the next decades, namely clean tech. My name, as already mentioned, is Pieter Bouwer, the Regional Trade Commissioner for Clean Tech in Europe. I will kick off the discussion with a few introductory remarks from a broad European perspective before introducing my colleagues covering three of the key clean tech markets in Europe, namely Spain, Germany, and Italy. You are probably aware, next slide please. You are probably aware of the EU's Green Deal. When Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission, announced the Green Deal in September 2019, it sent an important and a competitive signal because it was not only a commitment to be climate neutral by 2050, but to be the first continent to reach that goal. She stressed at the time that it was also a long-term economic imperative, that those who acted first and fastest would be the ones who grasped the opportunities from the ecological transition, as she put it. When COVID struck Europe, it was initially not clear what implications this would have for the Green Deal. But the European Commission, with strong support from key member states, quickly made clear that the Green Deal was not a luxury, but remained an imperative. In fact, it led to an even greater ambition in some areas, and it will form a central element of the European Union's €750 billion COVID recovery plan. Companies are positioning themselves accordingly, creating opportunities, even before the targets are enshrined in law. So where are the main opportunities for Canadian companies? While the EU has made significant progress in increasing the share of renewables in power generation, they've been very successful there and therefore reducing CO2 emissions in this area. Key sectors such as transportation and construction have lagged behind significantly. There's been very little progress there, and therefore they are now in focus. Based on recent experience, Canadian companies seem to perform particularly well where the EU's Green Deal meets the other major EU strategy, namely digital transformation, not least because of Canada's strengths in digital industries and AI. We therefore see Canadian companies doing well in smart cities, smart grids, and smart mobility. And trade commissioners in Europe have concluded successful initiatives in these areas in recent months, and some of them are still continuing. The area that I would like to highlight where we have seen perhaps the biggest increase in interest and activity in recent time is hydrogen, where Canada's strong capabilities complement the EU strategy and the national strategies already launched in Germany, France, Spain, Portugal, and the Netherlands. Familiar names such as Ballard and Cummins Hydrogenics are well established in Europe, but we have seen a range of other companies increasing their engagement. We, of course, look forward to the launch of the Canadian Hydrogen Strategy, which should give new impetus to cooperation and business in this field. So while CO2 reduction is the headline target in the EU's Green Deal, there are major opportunities for Canadian companies in other areas, including water and wastewater, which, as you know, is a major Canadian strength and where there is a strong demand for solutions and money to pay for those, particularly in Central and Eastern Europe. In that regard, I need to plug a webinar that we'll be hosting, another webinar, on the 10th of December by trade commissioners covering 15 markets in Central and Eastern Europe, which will include the participation of 2 expert speakers from PwC, who will provide in-depth analysis of opportunities in water and wastewater in the region. We did the dry run, no pun intended, this afternoon, and I've seen the documents that will be presented, and I can strongly recommend participation, which will be free. So next slide, please. So briefly, before we turn to the specific markets, just a few words on CETA, which is what this summit is all about. In clean tech, it is a major advantage. First of all, tariffs are zero for clean tech products, no tariffs. But perhaps more importantly, CETA offers us Canadian companies a strategically new kind of access to a really important market, including access to public procurement contracts. There's plenty of local competition in the EU. It's a very competitive market, of course. But CETA gives us a clear advantage over our main non-EU competitors. As you may see in the chart, I don't know if you can see the pie chart, but that shows the imports from non-EU countries into the European Union in clean tech. And those shaded darkly are the ones that do not have a trade agreement with the EU, including China and the US. So here we have a clear edge, and we encourage you to take advantage of that. And now, with those few introductory remarks, it's my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Nadia Rego, who is based at our embassy in Madrid, and who will speak about the Spanish market. So over to you, Nadia.
Thank you very much, Peter. So hello, good afternoon, everybody in Canada. My name is Nadia Rigo. I'm the Trade Commissioner at the Embassy of Canada in Madrid, and I cover the clean tech sector, which is a priority for us in the market. And a big reason of why is because Spain is expected to invest 240 billion in the next 10 years. So it's in its way to achieve a full energy transition, very similar to other markets in Europe. And this transformation, I have to say, was already going on before COVID, but it's something the COVID crisis, we think, will only accelerate it. So part of that is because Spain is seeing this as a strategy to really recover from the economy damage that has been done because of the COVID pandemic. And so there's a lot of impulse and funds coming in and being put into the clean tech sector. The Canadian clean tech industry, and by that I mean you that all are there listening, have a tremendous opportunity to benefit from CETA. And I say this because not everybody has that. Other international markets do not have a free trade agreement. So take advantage of this fact while you have it, because the room for opportunity may not last forever. Other free trade agreements are being negotiated. And yet we feel that Spain is somehow a bit, and in general, an underexploited opportunity for Canadian companies. And to give you a reference, Canada is number 17th in the ranking of countries from which Spain imports from. So for the 8th largest economy in the world, I think we could do better. And during my presentation today, which will be quite short, I know you've had a long day of presentations already, but I want to give you some keys on the main trends in the market, some examples of successes in Spain, and hopefully this will inspire you to do more. So can I have the next slide, please? So the first trend that I want to highlight is the transformation of the energy and electricity market in Spain. And what we're seeing here, there's new momentum in general for establishing additional cross-border connections in electricity and gas in Europe. And this is strategic because the objective is to really construct a market that is more flexible, more diverse, and more secure in the European Union. And if this is strategic for the European Union, you can understand it's even more strategic for Spain. So think of Spain as an energy island somehow. We are located in the peripheral area of the European Union and very scarcely connected with, except with Portugal, but with France, very scarcely connected. So there's a lot of really excitement of these new projects that will kind of unlock one of the biggest strengths of Spain is that the fact that we have a great renewable potential, lots of sun and lots of wind in some regions, and also a very important LNG regasification capacity, the highest in the European Union. So our hope is to really be selling energy to our neighbors in the north, which are great consumers. On the generation side of this market, something remarkable is that Spain last year reached 8.7 gigawatts of solar capacity added to the market after almost 10 years of very, very low number of projects. This is mainly due to a change in regulation that happened in 2019, and this reactivation is a key driver for clean tech products. On the distribution side, however, what we're seeing is a new regulatory landscape driven also by the European Union integration, where there's a new role for a new player in the market, let's say, of the aggregator. So basically, having a way of incentivize and really putting a value to large consumers that are able to or decide to turn off their consumption in peak times, or many small consumers as well, as a way to make a more efficient use of the existing distribution capacity. Connected with this increase also in renewable energy projects in Spain, there's also a new consideration of energy storage that could be an opportunity. This regulation is currently undergoing consultation, but this new flexibility market, how it's called, in which Canada, by the way, has really a very successful experience in some jurisdiction and also very successful companies in this space. It's set to explode in 2022, more or less. And then lastly, on the consumption side of this market, what we see is a rise of cell consumption in residential areas, but still with much room to growth. Just remember, we come a bit late to this market. And also for large consumers, an increase of power purchase agreements that is really encouraging this market. Something remarkable that is happening as well is that we see new players coming in this space, smaller utilities or smaller retailers that enter into the game with the hope to really take clients from the very well-established utilities of Spain by adding new value to the clients, especially digital tools that can help consumers to really provide energy savings. Can I have the next slide, please? So the second trend that we're seeing, and very much in line with what Peter was saying before, is that a focus really strong on green hydrogen. And the strategy for Spain, the hydrogen roadmap, is really recent, as you can see, a couple of months ago, and it has quite ambitious targets. In fact, also some funds attached to this strategy. Out of the recovery funds of the EU that will come to Spain, 1.5 billion euros will be specifically for the support of green hydrogen projects. And that has to be spent before 2023. So that's a lot of money to be spent in a short amount of time. I can guarantee you that right now the sector is booming and there's an active activity in the hydrogen space. And why is that? Well, Spain sees themselves as a potential, one of the leading countries in Europe to benefit from this strategy because of a number of reasons. First of all, as I said before, we do have quite a lot of renewable energy, and that can be converted into green hydrogen with more energy coming in. The second reason is that we have a quite developed network of gas infrastructure that is going to be reinforced and connected with our European neighbors. So that's another way of injecting the green hydrogen and being able to sell it. And the third reason is that Spain is also a logistic port hub. Just look how much sea we have surrounding us. And could use some of this port infrastructure to export the hydrogen and sell it overseas. So what is missing here? We're obviously behind other European markets. So if you're looking for the most mature market, Spain is not your market. But that on the good side means that there's lots to do. And there are gaps in the sector that could allow for Canadian hydrogen technology to find a space in the value chain of Spain. Here in the map, you're seeing some of the projects that right now have been announced between the last year and the year before that. And some of them, well, you see they're located near refineries, ports, or transport applications. So those would be the main applications. So think, for example, Repsol, one oil and gas company, has announced one of the biggest plants in the north of Spain that will produce synthetic fuel from captured CO2 and green hydrogen. Iberdrola, a very important utility in Spain, will produce green hydrogen from solar plants to feed into fertilizers companies, Fertiberia. So those are a couple of examples that are here, and the others was connecting the tourist industry in the islands of Mallorca or with port operation in Valencia. Next slide, please. The third area I want to mention is the development of the smart cities in Spain. And here, think for a moment, Spain is the second most popular tourist destination in the world. We received in 2019 82 million tourists. So for a country of 47 million population, that is a lot, especially for the main cities that take some of these tourists. And that challenge is well taken by the Spanish cities who have smart cities strategies put in place. But that also means that the objectives at national level won't be reached if the cities are not involved. And this includes several actions, especially with regards to energy efficiency in buildings, in residential properties, but also actions at the level of water and wastewater treatment, and waste collection and treatment. So in general, circular economy that is being here. And it's not a coincidence also the fact that one of the biggest shows for the smart cities takes place in Barcelona every year, the Smart City Expo World Congress, and the embassy has been leading quite a lot of action around this show with the Canadian Pavilion, and we will be doing that on the next year as well. And the opportunities here, I say, they are of course technological, but they're a bit more deep than that. There's a business transformation that is really happening on how cities understand their relationship with residents and with tourists. Next slide, please. And I'll finish right now just giving you 3 examples of successes that happened recently in the market, each one of them in the trends that I've been mentioning. So one of them is Visimax. It's a Quebec company, and they produce monitoring tools for circuit breakers in power grids. They signed a deal in April 2020 with Spain's TSO, Red Eléctrica Española, and they're very well established in Canada and in many other places in the world. The second success story is Ballard Power, a very well-known fuel cell producer from British Columbia. And they were invited to participate in one of the demonstration projects in the port of Valencia, which is one of the key ports of Spain, to use hydrogen into the terminal, the cargo terminal, to power some of the equipment into the port. And Ballard Power has offices in Europe as well, and the business development team is based in Europe. And the last success story that I'll mention is PBSC. They're also a Quebec company, and they were awarded with a 10-year public procurement contract in 2018 in partnership with a local company to run Barcelona's shared bike system. So 7,000 bikes and e-bikes and stations that are around the city, and offer this model that you've seen right now. It's a very solid and very light bike, but it's also adapted to the style of Barcelona. So they chose the colors, and they even have a design that is based on the Gaudí, the architect of Barcelona. And I think from these 3 success stories, we can obtain 3 valuable lessons that I'll be finishing with. One of them, and the first one, is really, you need to have a good solution, but it has to be really proven and with a solid track of successes. And this is because, well, Spanish companies and in general everybody will be more risk adverse to work with a foreign provider unless you can prove that your solution has worked somewhere else. The second advice that we can learn from these successes is like having people on the ground really helps. And this could be achieved by having a representative, a distributor, or a local partner that is in the market. And the third one is really adapt your product to the market. So make an effort to understand what moves your client in this new market that you're approaching, and make the effort to really put that in there from them. So that is all for me. Thank you very much for listening until the end of the day, and we really hope to hear from you in our offices in Madrid and Barcelona. And with that, I will leave you with my colleague Arne Uland, who's a colleague and a cleantech expert, really, in the Embassy of Canada in Berlin. Thank you very much.
So, thank you, Nadia. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Wonderful. Yes. So thank you, Nadia, and all what she said about the lessons learned in having success in Spain. That pretty much exactly applies to the German market as well. I have just only 2 topics to cover. The first one is similar to what Nadia told, and I will start with the first slide where you see 2 times the maps of Germany. In a representation where the power system is displayed in a graphic way. So on the left side, that's the situation 5 years ago or 6 years ago, 2014. The red peaks, this is where there's a lot of power surplus, and the green valleys, that's basically where there needs to be power transported to these regions. And you see in just 10 years, from 2014 to 2024, there will be a massive shift in the generation system. So you see that all those medium-sized bumps in the center and the southwest of Germany will disappear and will be green areas. What is behind that is the nuclear phase out of Germany. Germany decided a few years ago and changed the decision a couple of times, but we are in a nuclear phase out, which will be finalized in just 2 years. So I think there are currently two of the existing 17 nuclear reactors still online, but they will be switched off in the next 2 years. And then we will see more or less the situation which you see on the right side, and all those red peaks on the right-hand map. This is the one in the very far east and far west. That's still lignite. This is to be phased out until 2038, but it seems it will probably be earlier because of economics. And this will all be replaced by the other new peaks in the northern part of the country, which is mostly renewable energy and in particular wind. You see a lot of generation at the coastline. Of course, it's not just the coastline; it's offshore wind, and but it lands there, and that's why the graphic displays it there. Yeah. So next slide, please. This massive change, of course, creates a lot of business opportunity in renewable energy technologies. But in this sector, I don't want to go too deep into this. You all know that the Canadian wind energy, for example, wind energy sector is pretty much dominated by German companies. So it's rather components from Canada going into German wind turbines. But there are other technologies. So I know that there is a bit of solar, Canadian solar companies active in Germany, and it's currently, like in Spain, there is an increase of solar installations, in particular large-scale and medium-scale photovoltaic installations, including the power electronics, where Canada also has quite something to offer. And the second topic where I think renewable energy generation, Canada has something to offer, which is really needed in Germany these days, is geothermal, deep drilling geothermal from the western part of Canada. There are quite some examples of companies being active already, developing projects in that regard. However, I do think that there are more opportunities even in the indirect impacts of the energy transition, the massive change from baseload generation towards intermittent generation. And this is basically in this slide, you find all those important topics, which is the congestion management, how we can improve the integration of intermittent energy into the electricity grid, that is the transmission grid, as well as the distribution system. Then energy storage and demand side management is a big topic. Germany has not yet the regulatory framework to allow these kinds of applications, but there have been massive demonstration projects on the federal government level funded, which came to the conclusion that this will be a priority for the next few years to define markets for demand side management and technologies to solve those issues connected to that. The next one is Power to X. I will go deeper into it in the second topic on hydrogen. Power to X means that if you have that much intermittent generation in the grid, you have to create switchable loads. And Power to X, so producing hydrogen or fuel or heat or chemicals from excess electric power, is one of the business areas where I do see a lot of growth opportunities in the next few years. Then a few more electricity-related topics like smart meter rollout. Unlike most Canadian provinces in Germany, there is still no smart meters having been rolled out. They're just starting, and interestingly, the first smart meter which got a certification by the German federal authorities only received it because they used a proven Canadian technology for the communication within this the smart meters. It's Corinex from British Columbia. Electric vehicles charging stations, there's a massive program. So we are currently at 30,000 stations. This should be increased by 10,000 every 5 years for the next 20 years. That's basically the plan. So massive installations of electric charging stations for electric vehicles. And one of the lighthouse topics of the German federal government is zero emission data centers. This is open to any kind of technologies, but energy efficiency, using battery storage or hydrogen storage to balance loads, etc. Also intelligent switching of workload in between data centers to comply with the available electricity. So all these kinds of activities are currently very much sought after. But as indicated, it's still the regulatory framework is more still in progress. Therefore, I put it on that website, syntec.de. You can find a lot of information about what has been tested out and what likely will be solutions for the next year. So next slide, please. This is just very briefly the digitalization gap in Germany, which is pretty obvious, and the corona pandemic also made this very clear to us that we have some issues here in Germany, and that is very much apparently in the electricity sector, but there is a movement in any other kind of technical infrastructure like fresh water, wastewater, the natural gas grids, the huge number of district heating networks that we have in Germany. There's another problem. They are running on excess heat from coal-fired power plant, which will phase out, so they have to replace the heat there. And of course, transportation as the last sector where digitalization in smart cities and smart infrastructure is required. So next slide. I'm really running out of time, I see. The National Hydrogen Strategy is submitted or published in June, is a huge program, and it really lines out that for Germany, with its huge intermittent energy generation capacity, regards hydrogen as the major energy carrier for many sectors. Electricity very clearly as the principal source for local production, but also in industrial production. So there are already refineries using hydrogen from electrolysis of renewable energy. There are even more ambitious plans for road transportation, be it directly for hydrogen cars or synthetic fuel cars. And the heating sector, as mentioned before, the district heating systems, they need to be fed with heat that can also be done by hydrogen. One of the issues is only green hydrogen. Nadia also used this term. That means hydrogen made by electrolysis using renewable power is considered as a sustainable fuel in Germany. But there is a broad understanding that there will be a transition phase where other kind of generated hydrogen, for example, from natural gas, will be considered part of the mix. But this is at an national scale, still in discussion what will be the solution for that. The total projected funding volume for the next until 2040 is euro 9 billion. That's roughly 14 billion Canadian dollar. So there is a lot of infrastructure investments in hydrolysis, transportation infrastructure for hydrogen, storage for hydrogen, and of course hydrogen applications, as mentioned before. So next slide, please. The total hydrogen demand is projected as 110 terawatt hours per year. That's a pretty abstract figure, even for me as an energy technician. To give you a number of, or to get a more familiar number is the next bullet point. The new hydrolyzer installations in Germany of 5 gigawatt in the next 10 years will be sufficient for just about 10% of this overall consumption. So another 5 gigawatt will be added until 2040. So then we are maybe able to produce 25% maximum of the hydrogen that we need. So thus there will be imports of hydrogen, which is regarded as a major source. And that, of course, offers business opportunities for Canadian companies being able to produce sustainable hydrogen in Canada. Last bullet point, I will leave it out because I would like to emphasize before that before actually Canada will become a hydrogen exporter to Germany, which probably or hopefully will be the case in a few years, there are already now huge opportunities in providing hydrogen equipment like electrolyzers. Hydrogenics had the first commercial hydrolysis project here in Germany with a large German utility. Also, the first hydrogen-propelled train with hydrogenics fuel cells is operating in Germany. And there are many, many more, like storage companies. Daimler is producing in partnership with Ballard fuel cell cars and trucks. So there is already now a market for the equipment side, and there will be an even bigger market in future for the hydrogen export. So yeah, that was it from my end. I'm available as of next week in the embassy in Berlin. Use the Trade Commissioner website to get in touch with us. And I would like now to pass over to my colleague Patrizia Gigliotti in the Canadian Embassy in Rome, and she will talk about business opportunities in clean tech in Italy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Arndt. Good evening, everyone. I would like to start this presentation by giving you a quick overview of Italy and some figures to put the country in the context. With a GDP of more than $2 trillion in 2019, it is the 8th largest economy in the world and the 3rd largest economy in the EU, which makes it very attractive for export. Some of the strengths are, of course, its geographic location due to its central Mediterranean position. Just to give you a figure, 25% of container traffic passes through Italy's ports. Second, Italy has a strong manufacturing base, which is second only to Germany, and is one of only 5 countries with a trade surplus. And this means that Italian manufacturers are very keen in protecting this export advantage by investing in advanced manufacturing technologies and in digitalization that improve production, reduce costs, and also save energy. To help boost the investment in these new technologies, the Italian government has introduced an incentive called Industry 4.0, which is a horizontal measure accessible for all enterprises. And of course, there are pros and cons, and CETA has made it easier for Canadian companies to operate in all of the EU nations. However, language barriers, cultural differences, and unfamiliar way of doing business can be challenging for Canadian companies that want to enter the Italian market, and this needs to be considered. Some other challenges are lengthy procedures, even though there was some progress here, but there are lengthy procedure, red tape, and corporate tax burden, as there are many additional items to factor into the overall tax requirements in Italy. Regarding environmental issues that Italy faces, there are first of all those linked to climate change, mitigation and adaptation, such as desertification and hydrogeological risk due to extreme events, and urban air quality, waste management, and groundwater pollution. So these are the sectors, the main challenges that Italy faces. Slide, please. Today, I will focus on opportunities offered by circular economy and the sustainable energy management in Italy. I will also briefly touch upon the water and wastewater sector. Slide. As far as the circular economy, Italy ranks first in performance. The sector, when we say that, it includes manufacturing activities based on recycled material, with 77% of waste, industrial waste, sent for recycling. The recycling rate is more than double than the European average. The circular economy, according to a report in Italy, provides work, it's very large and provides work for 575,000 people and has a turnover 88 billion euro, equivalent to 1.5 of the national GDP, which is actually the same equivalent to value added of a traditional sector such as the textile, for example. As I was saying, the large manufacturing sector is very much involved in the development of the green economy in Italy. European and Italian legislation have also introduced concrete measures and incentives to promote in what they call industrial symbiosis. That is to say, transforming one company's end-of-life products into raw materials for another company. Also, these incentives are geared to place more sustainable products onto the market, which are designed to be easily repaired and recycled, and strengthening the producer, what is called the producer's extended responsibility. That means that when managing the waste from their products, companies must ensure compliance with recycling targets. They cover the cost of managing the separate waste collection, the sorting activities, the data collection, the processing, and communication. So there is a very big involvement of the industry in the circular economy in Italy. And the objectives for 2030 are very high, achieving, for example, the goal of 65% of urban waste by 2030. Recycling of packaging waste must reach 75% of the total by 2030. Landfill disposal must not exceed 10% of municipal waste, and cutting food waste by 50% in 2030. So this was for the circular economy opportunities. Slide, please. Regarding the sustainable energy management, Italy has very ambitious plans in digitalization and the use of smart technologies and storage. Also on sustainable mobility through private and public transportation electrification and the use of smart and energy efficiency technology in the vast real estate assets. This is also a big drive for digitalization technologies. Slide. Before going into the details, let me place things in context with some figures again. Renewable energy power has grown exponentially thanks to several incentive programs that ran between 2005 and 2020. And in Italy, in 2017, renewable energy power reached, for the first time, 87% of the whole Italian power demand. There is a strong presence of solar with 20 gigawatt, ranking Italy fifth in the world for solar power generation. Wind installations reached more than 9 gigawatts. And geothermal power is, with almost 1 megawatt, is very large, probably the largest in Europe, which is mostly concentrated in the region of Tuscany. There will therefore be a very big push towards better integration of renewable energy and electrification of everything, building EV infrastructure and smart grid, smart city, digitalization of technology and storage. Slide 6. Given this overview I just gave, let me go into some specific opportunities. The Terna Group, which is the power TSO in Italy, has just announced its new plan committing approximately 9 billion euro of investment that will go towards the development of the national electricity grid and asset renewable and efficiency, especially the rationalization of the grid in the main metropolitan areas and increasing interconnections with neighboring countries, especially in the Balkans. And finally, investment towards what they call the defense plan, mainly to increase grid security and stability. In addition, in 2020, the Italian government also allocated 24 billion for the upgrading and expansion of smart grid in southern Italy, where most of the renewable generation is located, to increase the quota of renewable into the grid. A second generation of smart meters has been developed based on the requirements set by the Italian energy regulator already to ensure full interoperability at every level. Enel Distribuzione, which is the larger TSO in Italy, part of the Enel Group, has launched a massive installation plan for the next generation smart meters for a total of 45 million pieces. 5G will be one of the main enablers of the smart grid system in Italy to allow a stable and ultra-fast connection between all the components. As you can imagine, it's not only a question of installing meters and upgrade, but it's also a question of upgrading the interoperability of the end data analytics. So AI and IoT will have a major role in this investment. Storage is another opportunity. Italy has 18,000 systems of small energy storage installed already for a potential of 80 megawatts. And mostly lithium battery technology is used. However, only 3% of photovoltaic plants are connected to a storage system, so there is a long way to go. Hydrogen will also be used for storage to stabilize the grid, and also as a mix into the natural gas grid. There were already some experiments by the gas TSOs, NAM, and they plan to do this to scale this project into the national grid. Hydrogen will also be used for industrial use, like for example in the steel manufacturing, and as I said, the heating. Regarding the electric vehicles, in 2018, there were 22,000 electric cars in Italy. There was a surge of 130% only in 7 months, but this is still a fraction of what is the potential of in Italy. These 22,000 electric cars are just 0.5% of all the car park. And an interesting niche is also the shared electric vehicles and also electric bikes, electric scooters. Regarding infrastructure, there are already 11,000 public-private recharging stations, but there is a big project to improve that. I mentioned also smart buildings. Italy has a huge real estate asset that needs to be upgraded. There are estimates of 2 billion square meter of buildings to be upgraded, and more than 50% of these buildings, existing buildings, are older than 40 years old. So there is a big market for retrofit in energy efficiency and in digitalization, both in private and in public real estate assets. And the market is interesting in several subsectors, in heating, in pumps, in digitalization, and it's a market especially for technology and software providers. The COVID-19 recovery measures that were introduced by the government include also something completely new, which is 110% of tax credit of expenses incurred. So this is something new and very interesting. It will be a big driver of refurbishing in the real estate asset. Slide, please. Yes, I will only touch on the opportunities in the water sector very briefly. This is just to say that there are general inefficiency in the national water sector. Almost 9 billion cubic meters of water for drinking purposes is withdrawn annually, but the volume supplied to consumers, on the other hand, is approximately 4.8 billion. So the difference means that there is a lot of water losses, water network losses, but also illegal withdrawals. So there is an inadequate infrastructure network, but also metering and monitoring is still a big opportunity here. This is all I wanted to say for now, and I thank you for your attention. Of course, you can always contact us through our Trade Commissioner Service website. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the colleagues and to you as the listeners. Thank you, Nadia, Arndt, and Patrizia. We did actually get a few questions, but we also have a hard stop in 4 minutes, so I will be just very brief. As mentioned by the colleagues, in most cases, it's best to work with trade commissioners. Feel free to contact our regional offices in Canada or any of us. You can find our contact details on the Trade Commissioner website so that we can discuss questions in detail. It's a free and confidential service to Canadian clients, to Canadian companies. Just briefly, we got a question about EU procurement, interest in EU procurement in terms of CETA. We have quite a level playing field, so Canadian companies can bid for tenders at all levels of government in the EU, and reciprocally, Canada grants similar access at all levels of government, so including provincial and municipal. It's above a certain threshold, normally around €144,000 upwards for EU contracts, or a bit more in the case of utilities, around €440,000. But there's an extensive guide provided by the Trade Commissioner Service that you can find online, or contact any of us for further advice. There's also the TED website, TED EU Tender Electronic Daily. It's the TED website where you'll find detailed information, and you can also put in alerts. Then a company called Intellinox. Thank you for the question. It was a fairly general question about which would be the best option as a country in Europe to centralize our distributor for ecological solutions. If it's the company that I'm thinking of, then they have demand control kitchen ventilation. Again, it's a question that should be answered in detail, considering all factors. So I would recommend that you rather get in touch with us. Then just a more general question, and maybe I can ask each of my colleagues just to end with a 1-minute sort of wrap-up, or 40-second wrap-up, sort of recent projects or initiatives that you worked on that you would like to highlight. Sort of just 40 seconds to each of you. And as I said, please feel free to contact any of us, or all of us, for further details. Nadia, would you like to start?
Sure. So within the market, we've worked quite a lot with water municipalities, water utilities, and connecting with suppliers in that sector through a virtual initiative. This is a new world, and we found it useful in that way.
Thank you. And Arndt? Yeah, so I would like to highlight my innovationcommunity.ca, innovation-community.ca. This is a landing platform for Canadian companies to get in touch with German, in particular German, but it's expanding into other European market as well, utility markets. So it's all these kind of smart energy technologies, smart gas technologies, all that what I mentioned before, that would perfectly fit into this environment, and provides free of cost, free of charge when you're subscribed, matchmaking services and more for your innovative ideas.
Thank you very much, Arndt. Patricia, the final word is yours.
Yes, we just had an initiative. It was just a webinar between Canadian and the European utilities, which was to open and prepare the floor for the Canadian booth at ENLIT 2021, which will take place in Milan, and will be a good opportunity to also meet other trade commissioners that will hopefully next year will come to Milan and help Canadian companies in the smart grid and the hydrogen and storage sector to showcase their technology.
Thank you very much, dear colleagues, and thank you to all of you for listening and participating, and please engage with us. We look forward to working with you to do even more in clean tech in Europe in the framework of CETA. Thank you very much.